Ugh, too cold and sterile. Where's the heart?
When I saw Disney's Aladdin remake earlier this summer, one of the friends I saw it with expressed her appreciation for the remake's new version of A Whole New World as being more realistic, since according to her, Aladdin and Jasmine would need to have been flying at the speed of sound to fly around the world like they did in the original.
Don't you dare close your eyes. Hold your breath, it gets better. Don't you dare close your eyes. Hold your breath, it gets better.
It's different, I'll give you that.
Now, I've had a long and bitter relationship with Disney's terrible live-action remakes, dating all the way back to 2014's Maleficent, but I'm not here to regurgitate what has already been said about them and how Hollywood's out of ideas and just make original content and whatnot. Lindsay Ellis already made a great video on Beauty and the Beast 2017 and the Disney remakes as a whole that is better than anything I could ever hope to make. But the crux of her video was how the remakes seek to respond to nitpicky criticisms of the animated classics in an attempt to make them more realistic for live action, which goes hand in hand with the main issue I've had with the remake I've dreaded the most ever since it was first announced. When asked on whether or not the 2019 Lion King remake was animated or live action, Jon Favreau said in an interview with Slash Film, "There's no real animals, and there's no real cameras. There's not even any performance that's being captured that's underlining data that's real. Everything is coming through the hands of artists. But to say it's animated, I think is misleading as far as what the expectations might be." He goes on to say, "I think calling it live action is also not appropriate either, because it sounds like we're trying to present something that isn't accurate. So, if everything about the Lion King remake that will end up on the screen comes from the hands of digital artists, not unlike the average modern animated movie being put out nowadays, then calling it animated wouldn't be misleading at all, would it? And if calling it live action is also inaccurate, then it must be animated, right? This isn't a hybrid film like Who Framed Roger Rabbit or even the 2016 Jungle Book, where there were most definitely live performances to capture and a live actor on a set or soundstage interacting with animated environments and characters that were added in later. Favreau admits that the 2019 Lion King exists entirely in a computer and was entirely crafted by animators and artists. So why is the Lion King being live action or animation even a question at all? Now, I've seen a lot of animated movies in my time, and I can say that beyond a shadow of a doubt, The Lion King 2019 is animated. Head to toe, top to bottom, it is an animated feature. It has been touted by the studio and filmmakers themselves as utilizing cutting-edge visual effects technology, where they use like digital VR, AR gear to manually move a virtual camera around a virtual open-world environment made in the Unity game engine, rather than solely animating from a keyboard. And as impressive as these advancements are, and they really are, it's all still CG technology and animation. There's not enough, if any, blending of live-action elements present to claim that the production transcends the medium of animation, since the cameras are still digital, the environment's virtual, and the characters animated. It's not using CGI to simulate or enhance interactions with live sets or actors like with the new Planet of the Apes movies, Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings movies, or Favreau's own Jungle Book remake that shot real, live actions on real cameras. Using this VR, AR technique is just a roundabout way of doing what CG movies have been doing for over 25 years. The Lion King is still done frame by frame and exists entirely in a digital world to the filmmaker's own admission, like any other CG movie. So again, why is it even a question at all if it's animated? In an interview with The Hollywood Reporter, Sean Bailey, the president of Walt Disney Pictures, their live-action studio responsible for all these remakes, said of The Lion King, "It is a new form of filmmaking. Historical definitions don't work. It uses some techniques that would traditionally be called animation, and other techniques that would traditionally be called live action." So by avoiding these historical definitions, he's tiptoeing around calling the movie what it actually is, animation, and claiming that it is a new form of filmmaking entirely that uses techniques from both live action and animation. But the thing is, the live action techniques he's referring to are not exclusive to just that medium. Since their inception, animation and live action have mutually shared common filmmaking practices and techniques that have bled over from each other for years. Stuff like cinematography, lighting, editing, etc. have always been in animation. And in recent years, live-action pre-productions have often used storyboards and animatics to help pre-visualize what they need to shoot. The motion capture process often uses practical live performance capture and practical live set work, but is still considered to be a form of animation. Stop motion animation uses practical sets, practical lighting, practical effects, and even real cameras. But again, it's still animation since it's done frame by frame. Animation is film, and animation is such a broad term that it has a wide and varied reach of what different forms and styles of filmmaking that can be considered animation. Meanwhile, there is only one kind of live action, capturing and focusing on live, real actions on screen. Sure, there are live action films that fill the screen with entirely CG effects and animation for entire shots or even entire sequences. But if the bulk of the film's runtime is anchored by live action footage, and these effects are made to enhance and not supplant the live action, then it still should just be considered live action. And if movies like the new Lion King are entirely animated and aren't capturing on screen any action that is live, like the other remakes have been doing, then it's not live action at all. Favreau himself said that his 2016 Jungle Book had as much animation as there is in every other animated movie, which the Lion King is following in the make of. So I ask again, why are the semantics of what to call this animated film even up for debate? Because while the filmmakers have been very here and there about it, the studio and the marketing very much want people to consider it and to be seen as live action, not animation. Let's go back to that Favreau interview when he said, "But to say it's animated I think is misleading as far as what the expectations might be." What kind of expectations could he be talking about? The expectations of how animated movies typically look, as The Lion King looks more photoreal than most? I guess, but we've had animated movies like Happy Feet and Rango with impressive technology that looked photoreal for the time, but were still widely perceived and touted to be animated. Does he mean the expectations of having kid-friendly content that wide-release animated movies usually have? Maybe, but mainstream animation has garnered a wider age appeal in recent years, and studios have very gradually been making more mature content that respects the audience's intelligence and doesn't treat them like children. And this is still Disney we're talking about. As with their other remakes, they're going to keep it safe in the family market and not make any major changes to how mature one of their crown jewel properties is, especially since the original is still being sold to little kids even today. So what kind of expectations could he be alluding to? Genre expectations.
Animation is not a genre. And people keep saying, the animation genre. It's not a genre. A Western is a genre. Animation is an art form.
Animation is not a genre, but how and why could it still be considered one that's just for kids? The answer is money. The biggest successes in animation, at least theatrically, are found when appealing to kids and families that have a lot of money to spend. Big budget theatrical animation is a costly and time-consuming endeavor that needs to reliably net huge profits in order to even stay afloat. Meanwhile, kids reliably will want to see content that they can buy readily available merchandise of and laugh at poopy jokes during. This has been the mindset for most of animation's theatrical life, and although it isn't a hard and fast rule, films from the likes of Illumination, Disney, and Pixar, no matter how artistic their films happen to be in the end, have continued to succeed by primarily tailoring themselves to kids and families and that market, self-imposing genre expectations across their films along the way. Meanwhile, artist-driven films from smaller studios like The Iron Giant, Into the Spider-Verse, and insert Laika movie here, continue to get the shaft at the box office since they either don't heavily market their kiddiness, if any, or don't spawn heavy amounts of merchandise. So in order for the medium to continue to fruitfully exist theatrically, big studios have had to adopt what has been quietly considered generic tropes. And you know the ones: talking animals and creatures, bright and bouncy animation, musical numbers, pop culture references, celebrity voices, heavy leans towards comedy, so on and so on. These generic tropes have persisted for so long and have shaped what audiences come to expect from the medium of animation as a whole: a kids genre.
It's a cartoon.
So back to The Lion King 2019. It still contains the same elements as the original animated movie and of animated movies today to consider it of that genre. Celebrity voices, talking animals, musical numbers, pop culture references, etc, etc. So if it's made like an animated movie, looks like an animated movie, and still has the genre conventions of an animated movie, then why is the marketing and discourse surrounding its production not treating it like one? Well, again, the answer is money. But this time money from the greater mass audience craving for realism. Just as The Dark Knight popularized darker tones and grittier realism from superhero movies, the idea of bringing animated films into live action coincides with the desire from audiences and filmmakers alike to now make fantastical stories in live action more realistic and grounded for an older audience. Since animation is still seen as childish, the idea is that having these stories in live action with some semblance of realism somehow legitimizes the silly cartoon into now a real movie.
It's a cartoon! You know, I mean,
This is why movies like The Smurfs and Sonic the Hedgehog bring their fantastical characters into the real world as to avoid having to place the story in their original fictional worlds. And this is no accident either, as this mindset has more than proven its profitability, especially for Disney. The live-action Disney remakes have followed this taste for realism by retroactively changing elements of their classic animated fairy tales in response to logical nitpicks made by now cynical adults in order to make them more logical and realistic for live action, such as somehow making a magic carpet ride astonishingly boring. Moreover, this want for realism in live action has translated into the production design as well, ridding the original animated designs in favor of more photorealistic, fleshy details, for better or worse, lest we forget the Will Smith genie and
Sonic.
Pokemon Detective Pikachu was able to hit a really good balance between faithful and hyper-real by directly translating the original designs into live-action textures without a lot of actual reinvention of how the characters are supposed to look. So where does this take us in regards to The Lion King? Despite it still being about animated talking animals that sing and dance, what about the remake could make it considered realistic enough for people to mistake it for live action and treat it like a live-action movie? The irony is that the way it's animated is what's fooling people into thinking it's live action. The CG work on display in The Lion King 2019 is remarkable and unprecedented for an animated movie. I'm not denying that. It has perhaps the most photoreal CG possible just on the attention to detail in the environments, the way the characters move, and the textures alone. This is basically visual effects quality CGI occupying the screen for the entirety of a film's runtime. On a technical level, the film is already a brilliant success. But here's where another battle of semantics comes in: visual effects or animation. The discussion that should be had about this movie is whether or not it is all digital visual effects or animation. Again, I say it's animation. Putting aside the fact that computer-generated visual effects are a form of animation, what we typically refer to as visual effects on their own is meant to just be that. Effects, made to enhance the live-action elements of a film on screen, like how they brought the Transformers to life or make Greedo shoot first. So if everything on screen is a visual effect and is not enhancing or interacting with anything that's real, then none of it is. Animation in and of itself is a kind of visual effect, creating the illusion of life out of drawings or models or whatever. But outside of a technical production context, we don't call what we see in Pixar movies visual effects. We call it animation by animators. Where I feel animation and visual effects diverge is in how they do or do not try to emulate realism, which animation in our traditional sense does not, nor should it. Animation at its best doesn't strive for realism, but for style and believability. Given its elastic nature, animation allows for a wider berth of ways for stories to visually express feelings and ideas not feasible in any other medium. Sure, Spider-Verse could technically be remade in live action, but there's no way it would be able to present the same viewing experience as the animated original. Animation inherently allows for a mode of expression and design that can't be done in live action. By its very nature, live action could never look the way movies like Into the Spider-Verse, Aladdin, or Spirited Away do. No movie could look the way the original Lion King does, and the photorealism of the remake proves this point more than any other Disney remake. Apart from one being CG and the other hand-drawn, what makes the 2019 Lion King fundamentally different from the 1994 original is that it's latching itself too closely to the desire to be photorealistic, thereby taking away a majority of the likability the original Disney animation had as an art form and as a viewing experience. Like with the other remakes, by trying to emulate a realistic look and feel for the characters and environments, the vibrant colors, lively facial expressions, and painterly backdrops, they're all gone. It's akin to replacing a Van Gogh painting with a photograph. Both are beautiful renderings of their respective medium, but at least for me there is a stronger presence of an artist's hand and craftsmanship in the painting than in the photo, which is one of the things audiences have loved about hand-drawn animation to begin with. By adhering to a photorealistic aesthetic, there is very little room to take the kind of creative artistic license in how to bring the story and characters to the screen that Disney is known for, since they have to adhere to how real environments and real animals look and move as nature intended, resulting in comparatively drab landscapes and unappealing character designs. Pumbaa can't look like a delightful caricature of a real warthog that took lots of reinventive design work to narrow down to anymore, nor a brilliantly operated puppet as seen in the Broadway show. Instead, he just looks like a realistic warthog, which isn't as fun or cute and not how people should remember the character. These character posters weren't poorly received because the CGI was bad, but because they gave us exactly what we expected, just real-looking animals with 1,000-yard stares. The characters don't look as distinct from one another as they need to be for the purposes of a story in a visual medium like this. These realistic designs don't allow them to be as expressive or unique as they should be either. In an interview with Fandango, Favreau said that part of the naturalistic approach to The Lion King 2019 was trying to make the animals express emotions without facial expressions.
You serious?
Half of a good performance, animated or otherwise, is in the facial expressions, so limiting the most pivotal area of a performance in an emotional story like The Lion King is just idiotic. There is a reason that animal features are exaggerated and anthropomorphized in animation, so they can carry expressions and performances the human audience can read emotions off of and understand. Even movies like Happy Feet and Guardians of the Galaxy were able to give their realistic animal characters some readable expressions at first glance. I can't read what anyone in The Lion King 2019 is feeling or thinking. As expensive and incredibly rendered as the photoreal characters appear to be, the actual character animation on them is surprisingly limited, at least as far as what's to be expected from this story, these characters, and the names of Disney and The Lion King. The Lion King 2019 is both the exact same movie as the 1994 original and entirely different at the same time. It is feeding us the exact same story, characters, lines of dialogue, and songs, but is not giving us the same emotional experience as the original. And yet I know the stage version does the exact same thing of giving us those elements of the original in a new way, but I don't cry foul over that since it accomplished a more daunting creative task by bringing the story from the animated screen to the live stage in unexpected ways, while still maintaining the performative energy of the original animation, while the remake is giving us exactly what we'd expect a realistic, live-action Lion King to look like. The remake just takes the art out of The Lion King and feels manipulated by current tastes of cynical audiences and void of any of the artistry the name The Lion King is associated with to satisfy a craving for realism in a movie about talking animals. It's an animated movie absent of what makes animated movies great and feel alive. It's animation for people who don't like animation. It's animation for people who can't suspend their disbelief enough to believe in something just because it looks like a cartoon. Animation being made realistic either through live action or photoreal CGI robs the medium of what makes it unique. Sure, the animated classics are still there and had no shortage of elements that made them memorable outside the visual, but the way the animation presented those things is what sticks out in our hearts and minds the most and makes them iconic decades later. The live-action remakes somehow try to capture the magic of the originals by ridding themselves of the thing that made them magical in the first place. It's not the same thing just to show us two actors dressed like Aladdin and Jasmine realistically riding on a magic carpet, accounting for their possible top speeds and realistic natural lighting with CGI that will date itself in a few years if it means not having the same energy, colors, and scenery of the timelessly animated original. It's not enough to show us realistic animals flapping their mouths up and down to make a live-action Lion King good. Those may look more realistic, but they're not more believable.
That's what animation is. It's animated.